open to guidance and inspiration. I mean to bring my healthy energies to life. We're going to sing a song this morning from Eddie Watkins Jr., and it's called All the Same Stuff. And, well, happy anniversary. I've been here for a year now. Oh, yeah. Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's a joy to be here and see your smiling faces. Another thing that happened this year, though, is as we launched, Connie and I launched the new year, we added on to our plant business. And with that comes a little bit of stress at times, and you're unsure of what's going to happen as you expand and grow. And I like to call it the birth process. It's painful. It can be. But you know that there's joy on the other side, so you keep moving on and you keep doing it. And I like the way Eddie Watkins Jr. talked about this song, or how he wrote it, the chorus. It's all the same stuff. Since God is all there is, you see, what else could anything else be? It's all the same stuff. Talks about whatever we think most about, where our mind stays, that's what comes about. So when we were doing some work on these finances on the plant stuff, I got a little distracted and a little bit concerned, a little bit worried, and I caught myself going down this spiral of fear. No. I don't want to think about that, because that's what I'm going to bring, and I don't need to bring that. I want to bring the good. And so I encourage you to enjoy the song and join in on that chorus if you like. Look around and everything you see is living and out picturing of what's going on inside your consciousness. You don't like what you see, change your mind and your belief. Keep what's working for you and throw out the rest. Easy's the other side of tough, smooth is the other side of rough, down is just the other side of love. And it's all the same stuff. Since God is all there is, you see, what else could anything else be? It's all the same stuff. You can rearrange it any way you want. I'm not trying to get mystical, scientific, or psychological. I'm just stating the plain and simple case. Whatever we think most about seems to always come about, end up staring us right in the face. Easy's the other side of time, smooth is the other side of rough, down is just the other side of love. And it's all the same stuff. It's God is all there is, you see. What else could anything else be? It's all the same stuff. You can rearrange it any way you want. Take it away, girl. Join with us here. And it's all the same stuff. It's God is all there is, you see. What else could anything else be? It's all the same stuff. You can rearrange it any way you want.
It is all the same stuff. If if we really believe that God is all there is, there are not two powers here. There's not God and the devil. There's only God. And if that's what we believe and we see this, then no matter what shows up in our life, it's all God. We can rearrange it any way we want in our mind. We can tell ourselves any story we want to tell ourselves. But it's all God.
Amen.
Thank you. We're continuing our series on getting grounded, the basics of science of mind. And so this week, I'm looking at the principles of successful living. And in our textbook, it says, science of mind is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Neither does it promise something for nothing. It does, however, promise the one who will comply with its teachings that they shall be able to bring greater possibilities and happier conditions into their experience. And isn't that what we all want in life? We want greater possibilities. We want happier conditions. We want to be joyful. We want to be able to enjoy life. And so that's what we're looking at today, is how can we do this? How can we bring greater experience into our lives? And this is possible for each of us to do that. And the way we do it is that we have to transform our minds. So how do we transform our thoughts and transform our minds here? When we're able to do that, we're attracting to ourselves those things that we desire in life. In order to transform our minds, my first principle here for successful living is to cultivate a connection within ourselves. So I'm talking about a connection with ourselves and a connection with spirit, which is in us. Ernest Holmes used to say at the beginning of every one of his radio broadcasts, he did a lot of teaching, and back in the early 20s and 30s, they would do it through the radio. They did home courses too, where they sent you material, but every week he would have a radio broadcast and bring his information, his teaching to the world. And at the beginning of every radio broadcast, he would say, "There is a power for good in the universe, and you can use it." And the organ music would swell. So how do we find this power for good in the universe? And how do we use it in our lives? This is what can help transform our lives and help us to be successful and happy. We start with having faith in this power. And faith that power is within each one of us. When we have a spiritual focus in life, then we can really live an authentic life, a successful life here. We can go within and cultivate this relationship with ourself and with spirit. Understanding that the presence of spirit is at the core of each of our beings. The very nature of God is our nature too, for we are made of God's stuff. Isn't that what Alicia was just singing? It's all God. It's all the same stuff. And so we are God, in a sense, because there's nothing else except for spirit. Now, don't think you're all high and mighty, because you're only a piece of God. God is much greater than you. But yes, you are God because you are made of God itself. Understand that? Some people get a little confused. They think, well, I'm God, I can tell anybody what to do. No, it doesn't quite work like that. But all power and possibility is there available to you to use when you transform your mind and understand that you are a spiritual being and the nature of God is your nature. We talk in Science of Mind about going within, about centering ourselves, going into the silence, meditation, quieting our minds. Many spiritual practices here that will take us within ourselves to shut out the outer world and to cultivate that relationship with the God of our understanding within us. When we do this, we're cultivating that relationship with the God that is all-loving, all-knowing, and is infinite in all it does. In his book, Can We Talk to God?, Ernest Holmes says, when the mind is peaceful and still, it catches a vision of a greater good. While the mind is in turmoil and combat, it cannot receive an image beyond the limiting circle of small measure in which it has been treading around. So when our minds are in turmoil and combat, we're kind of walking in the same circle. We're repeating this same thought over and over. But when we can open ourselves up to more possibilities, to the good of God that's there, and allow that to come into our life, we can see our lives change. My first point is cultivating this connection within ourselves is twofold. First, we need to learn to love ourselves. Love ourselves enough that we can recognize then that God is within us. Spirit is inside of each one of us. And that unconditional love of God is the very nature of each one of us. We have that unconditional love within us, and we can share that with others if we stay connected to that source, if we stay connected to Spirit within. It's usually our minds or our egos here that want to give us limiting messages. So when we connect with this infinite mind, with this divine intelligence, the greater mind of God here, then we open ourselves up to so much more in our life. On page, God's unconditional love. On page 269 of the textbook, it says, if humankind is intelligent, it will naturally seek to free itself from misery and unhappiness. Well, how many people here want to be miserable and unhappy? That's what I thought. We all want to be free. We all want to be joyous. We all want to be happy. And so let's open ourselves up to experience that. Not keep moving the same thoughts over and over in our minds. Let's get something bigger. The unconditional love of God is something that we can all embrace. It's our way of creating freedom in our thinking and changing the conditions of our lives. We can have a bigger vision of life when we connect with that spiritual possibility that all things are available to us. Michael Beckwith said, don't tell God how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big your God is. And that's a great thing to remember. Don't whine to God about what's going on. Tell your problems how good God is to you. So a poem I found this week that I want to share with you. See if you can relate to this. I got up early one morning and rushed right into the day. I had so much to accomplish, I didn't have time to pray. Troubles just tumbled around me, and heavier came each task. Why doesn't God help me, I wondered. God answered, you didn't ask. I tried to come into God's presence. I used all my keys at the lock. God gently and lovingly chided, why, child, you didn't knock. I wanted to see joy and beauty, but the day toiled on gray and bleak. I called on the Lord for the reason. God said, you didn't seek. I woke up early this morning and paused before entering the day. I had so much to accomplish that I had to take time to pray. So our first principle here for living a successful life is to connect with spirit within and cultivate that relationship with our divine power, with the God within. Our second principle for successful living is to develop your spiritual muscle. And the way we develop spiritual muscle is by using spiritual practices each day. We develop through thinking about the power of thought and learning how to use our divinely guided thoughts to create the outcome of what we want in our life. What we think about, we're going to bring about. So when we open ourselves up to what God has for us, unlimited possibilities, we can get out of limited thinking and we can open ourselves up to something much greater. Now, when you're going to develop physical muscle, we'll usually do something like lift weights, do squats, if you're crazy, or go running. There's all kinds of physical exercise here that you can do, but you do this all the time in order to build the muscle in your physical body. So for a spiritual person, you can still do this and take care of your physical body, but you're also needing to build spiritual muscle. And to build spiritual muscle, we do things like science of mind treatment. That's our way of saying affirmative prayer. We do meditation, visualization, visualizing, affirmations, spiritual readings, singing music that uplifts us. Whatever spiritual practices you do that help connect you with the God within and recognize that you are one with the divine. That's how you build spiritual muscle. Alicia just sang, "Easy is the other side of tough. Smooth is the other side of rough. And down is the other side of up." It's all the same stuff. It's all God. So if we're going to see everything as God, then no matter what it might look like on the outside, we can change that in our minds. We can rearrange and open ourselves up to see it differently. Is the glass half empty or half full? You can argue either way. Or you can say, there are unlimited possibilities here. Are you open to seeing things in a new way than what your eyes tell you? So I'll share this story with you. This is the story of an Amish man and his son. They were visiting a large mall for the first time either of them had been in such a place. They gazed at all the bright lights and the vivid displays in the stores. They had a mixture of awe and of distaste. These were Amish people. They came upon a wall that had 2 silver doors. Never having seen an elevator before, the father and son watched as an elderly woman in a wheelchair pushed a button and the doors opened. She wheeled herself into the small room, and behind her the doors closed. They watched as the lights above the doors went from 1 to 3 and then back down to 1. The doors opened, and out walked a beautiful 25-year-old woman who smiled at the man and his son as she passed them. The Amish man scratched his beard for a moment. Then he turned to his son and said, "Run home and get your mother." Are you open to learning that things may not be just like you think you're seeing them? That there may be a whole nother reality there that you're not aware of? And how often do we judge our lives because we're looking at something and saying, well, this is what it is? You know, the phrase, "it is what it is." Katie has taught me that's not what you say. You say it is what it needs to be. And that's much more open to seeing things different. If you're open to seeing things in a different way, then you're building your spiritual muscle here. Another example here. I was talking to a man this week about new cabinets in our house. And he came in and he measured and he talked and he showed us all this stuff. And he left. Well, the next morning he called me back. And we had our conversation, some questions he had, and I answered them. And at the end of the call, he said, I want to tell you what I did. I said, okay. He said, well, I called you earlier. And when the person answered, I started asking my questions. He said, the guy seemed confused. He even sounded intoxicated. And he said, I didn't think that sounded like you from the way I met you yesterday. So he said, I went on with my questions, and finally the guy said, I have no idea what you're talking about, and hung up on him. Well, the contractor put his phone down and looked at the number he had called. He said, it was 1 digit off from your number. So he redialed the correct number and got me. But what if he wasn't willing to see things differently? What if he would have just said, well, that jerk, I'm not going to do any work for him, and not have pursued his questions or giving a quote for what he wanted to do? So we get that opportunity to see things differently. They're not always as they first appear to us. We get to embrace our spiritual power by using our spiritual muscle. We are each an individualized expression of God. That means no two of us are alike. We're all unique, and we're all part of God. So each one of us is needed to have a whole and complete humanity, to have a whole experience here. And no one is better than anyone else. Our third principle for successful living is to be open to receive your good. Be open to receive your good. It's there for you. And are you going to be open to it? Or will you limit yourself with your own thinking? In Science of Mind, page 272, it says, our part is to be ready and willing to be guided into truth and liberty. Are you ready and willing to be guided into truth and liberty? All doubt and fear must go. In their place must come faith and confidence, for we shall be led by the Spirit into all good. Are you ready to be led into all good? Or are you wanting to block some of that because you're not quite worthy yet? Because you think you have to do something before you are worthy enough to be open to good. I found this story that I think illustrates how we can live our life. On the way home from church, a little girl turned to her mother and said, Mommy, the preacher's talk this morning confused me. I wonder how many of you have said that. The mother said, oh, why is that? The little girl replied, well, the preacher said God is bigger than we are. Is that true? And the mother said, yes, that's true. The little girl said, well, the preacher also said that God lives within us. Is that true? And the mother replied, yes, that's true. The little girl said, well, that's where I get confused. If God is bigger than me, and God lives in me, then why doesn't God show through me? Are you allowing God to show through you? God lives within you. And I'll tell you, God is bigger than you. So are you allowing that nature of God to show through your life? Being open to receive your good means that you let God show through you in your actions and in all that you do. So it's up to us to be able to do this and allow Spirit to show through. Mother Theresa said, not all of us can do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. How are you living your life? How are you showing up? I know you're all very loving and very excited and very joyful when you're here. But when you go out into the highways and the byways, when you get to work, when you're driving on the interstate, how are you showing up in life? Are you still showing up as the divine? Are you letting God show through you? Or are you limiting that because of your thinking? If you align yourself with Spirit, then you can let that good come through. And the world will see God shining through you because God is bigger than you and God is inside of you. And God flows forth from you. We give expression to Spirit as we live our lives. So your homework this week is to practice these principles of successful living, to cultivate that connection with Spirit within, and to develop your spiritual muscle by using spiritual practices daily. Whatever speaks to you, whatever works for you, prayer, meditation, listening to inspiring music, doing readings, whatever works for you. Do that so that you can connect with the Spirit within. Cultivate that relationship. Build your spiritual muscle. And then you'll be able to be open to receive the good that is there for you. Let God shine through you this week. And let the world see it. You see, as you let God shine through you, life is reflecting back to you. And so you'll see God reflected back in the people you come in contact with, in the situations of your life. But you get to look at it, and look at it with spiritual eyes. Be ready to see that maybe that little box room with silver doors may not work the same magic as what you first thought. Let us pray.